So these houses were actually built in the 1950s, and the road, the bypass, in fact, the bypass that goes through the centre of the town, not that there's anything unusual in that happens in the United States all the time, that was also built at that time, and this was sort of designed to show how socialism was actually working in this part of the world. The houses themselves are actually, the idea is meant to look original, and they certainly, I think now, 60 years later, they do look as though they were the original buildings. Now this street here, buildings on the left are original, so they could be from the 19th century, and the houses on the right are from the 1950s. Now the Nazis destroyed this part, in my opinion, because they wanted to build their own city here, like they wanted to do in Zamość, make it a German city in the east. And in front of this castle up there, is that not a great place to actually do it with these views? So I think I can understand, therefore, what the Nazis were thinking and their logic. So I'm now going to walk up this street here, which is Ulica Kowalska, and we'll see what else we can see here. The street there is Ulica Furmanska, and all the houses on the right hand side and towards the castle, they're all new, whereas those on the left are all old. So up into the main road up there, this is part of the ghetto. In fact, the main entrance to the ghetto was in front of me right now. Now the Nazis pulled the houses down which were here, which were similar height judging by the photographs. And incidentally, if you go to my Facebook page, with the link will be above, you can actually see some of those photographs, the way this area looked before the Nazis pulled it all down. I imagine this was meant to be for German settlers coming here. They tried to do something similar in Zamość as well by bringing in immigrants who were German from wherever. Not really very clear in Himmler's rather ludicrous plans where he was going to lay hands on so many Germans from. Up until this time, of course, that the German area of Lublin had been in this general direction towards the centre of town, streets like Krakowskie Przedmieście and around that area, Trzeciego Maja, which were reserved for the Germans. Here we have the ghetto, and this was the main entrance to the ghetto, was up here. I found a photograph of it, so you can see that on my website. And the ghetto was actually formed in March 1941, and in front of us, on the other side of the road, we can see a post office. Now, that was the post office for the ghetto, although it was actually outside the ghetto. But the postmaster, the person responsible, was able to maintain communications via Switzerland until 1944. This was from various places he managed to do that, because obviously the ghetto had been liquidated before then. Now the ghetto was divided into two parts, which was A and B, and the lower part of the ghetto, which is down here, was for those people who were not working for the Nazis, and the B part is for those who were working for Nazis. And I'll be saying a bit more about that later. The Nazis added a second part to the ghetto, and they did this in many places. For example, if you've seen Schindler's List, you've got the part where he's taking Armand Goethe has been taken around the town, and somebody says ghetto A, ghetto B, and this is the place where people don't work, and I suppose you want to get started with them first. And to a large extent, that is quite accurate of the way things were. This part here was for people who worked for the Nazis, particularly in businesses such as clothing manufacturing. Also, those ghetto functionaries worked here. And in the case of Lublin, many people actually worked outside of the ghetto and lived outside the ghetto, including some members of the Judenrat. The ghetto, they had to have special permission, of course, to do that, but it wasn't a sealed ghetto in as much as Łódź or Warsaw above all were sealed. Barbed wire was put up in different sections of the town, but it was clearly meant as a temporary measure. It wasn't the walls, for example, that you see in Warsaw. On the right we have a building which was used in 1944 as a help centre for Jews who had come back here and had somehow survived the Holocaust. Of course, it was outside the ghetto as it was before. The ghetto is actually running on the left hand side of this street. But these houses are, I think, to a large extent as they would have been in 1939, except the difference is that then they would have been teeming with people. Although to be living in the old part of the town certainly can be quite attractive, you don't have many of the modern conveniences that you'd have in a new flat, and that is why places like this are often empty. As I understand it, the arch which we see in front of us though is actually new. There was a passageway through here, but not of that type. And coming through here, we come into the central part of the old town, and it certainly looks very attractive today. In Lublin, it doesn't quite have the nightlife you'd expect in an old town as you get, for example, in Wrocław or in Kraków, Warsaw. But I think it's just a matter of time before that actually happens. So we have the ghetto is on the left, but the street on the right is outside of the ghetto. Now, the sealed ghetto was made in March 1941. Until that time, people could more or less move freely as they wished. So that's why, for example, we have photographs which were taken by mainly German soldiers, and you can see these streets in those photographs. Please see my Facebook site for that. We have one of the photographs is actually taken from around here. We've got the deputy head of the Judenrat, and he is standing here, and we can see some of the other buildings in the background. It was just taken off him by chance. He clearly wasn't posing, and just walking in the street. There's a Jewish restaurant called Mandragora. It's quite good, but by Lublin standards, it's a bit on the expensive side. And I want to say something else about this street here. Now, the Nazis had actually intended to put this street into the ghetto, but the local Polish council objected to it on the grounds that the people who lived here were largely Catholics, and the Nazis gave way. They did not put this part into the ghetto as a result. Those who've seen the film Escape from Sobibor will remember the person who was sort of head of the resistance in the camp, one Leon Feldhändler, and after he escaped from Sobibor on the 14th of October 1943, he managed to survive the war, in January 1945, that's to say, several months after the Nazis have left Lublin, he was living in this building which is in front of me now on the first floor, and during the night a group of people came, banged on the door. He didn't actually respond to it, but they shot through the door and murdered him. I can only say that this was an act of racist violence by a group, anti-Semitic group, who unfortunately they were still quite strong in Poland, and he was murdered in that way. So to actually have survived Sobibor, having lost all of his family, gone through what he went through, and then some 7 months after the Nazis had left Lublin, he gets murdered by his fellow countrymen. It's really extremely shocking. In that time, to about 1948, he got around 2,000 to 3,000 Jews were actually murdered by racist Catholics. And after what happened in Kielce in 1946, you know, this massive wave of emigration. A lot of it went to Israel, but also went to other countries such as the United States, and to a lesser extent Scandinavia and the United Kingdom. Of course, the attitude, I must say now, has completely changed, despite one or two racists on the internet hiding behind false names because they feel it gives them some kind of power or whatever. But the average Pole in the street is extremely ashamed of these things, and so I think that it's turned out quite positively.